Well, good morning and welcome to our session in the Learning Planet Festival. We're going to explore how we can enterprise in education for fit for future results. In this recorded plenary session, I have two guests, two speakers in order of appearance. We will have Veerle Vandeweerd and Georgios Kostakos from the COVIDEA initiative. And I'm going to share screen. We're going to share some slides with you and have a relatively brief description of what we are doing and suggesting. It will be followed by a live discussion here in Amsterdam, but we also hope that it will spark some discussions on your side and you will be able to benefit from what we are presenting here. We are going to build our presentation on two projects or initiatives. One is COVIDEA and the other one is the ParENtrepreneurs project. But all in all, what we would like to do is that we would like to put these two flowers together. You can either see them as flowers or cogwheels, but both of them are very colorful. They have a lot of elements and they can also work together very well. On the left-hand side, you can see the cogwheel or flower of the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the reasons why we are holding this event is that in Berlin, UNESCO has adopted the Berlin Declaration on Education for Sustainable Development, which is much, much more than environment protection. It is a really 21st century education approach where we are trying to educate people who are responsible and critical enough to live a life that will make it possible for the next generations to also live their lives on the same planet as we are now. And the other flower or cogwheel, whichever your visualization of it is the Entrecomp flower, and which highlights the entrepreneurial skills that are so necessary for renewing education all over the world. I just want to have a footnote saying that we are not going to discuss the business model for education and also not about the privatization of education, but we're going to talk about entrepreneurship in its broad sense, collecting ideas, spotting opportunities, identifying resources, and implementing action that is suitable for the left-hand side flower, education for sustainable development. With this very short introduction, I'm going to hand over to Veerle, who is going to talk about the COVIDEA, COVID Education Alliance. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you for all those who are listening for being with us this morning. And good morning to all of you. Thanks for this opportunity to briefly introduce the COVID Education Alliance, or better said, to introduce what the COVID Education Alliance stands for, namely the conviction that we need to change what we teach and how we teach it. Indeed, our current education system was developed more than 150 years ago. And at that time, life and the world was very different from where we are now. Next slide, please. Indeed, the system was made for bringing students into a market economy where they would practice in a profession that they would keep for the rest of their life, being a lawyer, being a doctor, whatever it might be. And it was based mainly on acquiring the necessary knowledge to be able to practice this profession. But the world has changed since then quite a bit. At this moment in time, I think we all agree that we are living in a very quickly changing world, increasingly becoming a digital world, that the professions we have today are not the professions we will practice tomorrow. I, for myself, already during my life changed my profession 3 times. And I'm pretty sure that most of you, by the time you are at my age, you will have exercised quite a bit of different jobs. So we need to make lifelong learning one of these crucial elements on how we look at learning and how we look at our teaching. Next slide, please. So in COVIDEA, we focus on this need to change how and what we learn. And we mainly do this one from a digital perspective, because we firmly believe that there are the digital tools available to help us make this switch, this necessary switch, to be able to be ready for the future, that these tools do exist. I don't want to zoom in on this slide in too great details because the next slides are doing it, but I just want to draw your attention to two prerequisites if we want to talk about, digital education. And the first one is, of course, in the blue triangle at the bottom, that we need to have internet access. And unluckily, this is not yet the case everywhere in the world. And secondly, of course, that we have a safe environment. Again, this is certainly not the case, as is increasingly not becoming the case, but these are two prerequisites COVIDEA is not taking into its work program, but it is important that we are aware that they need to be available. Next slide, please. So in the first place, COVIDEA focus on changing what we are learning. Changing what we are learning, which was built mainly on knowledge acquirement, learning by heart, then sitting exams and reproducing what you knew by heart. But nowadays, we also need to build character. We need to build judgment. We need to be able to differentiate false from not false news. We need to build resilience, like the COVID pandemic has shown us, social awareness, and build responsible citizenship. In short, we need, in fact, to learn also the social and emotional intelligence component of our daily living. And of course, understand very well also computational science, beside being able to read and do the general maths. So this is quite an overhaul of what we know at this moment in time, or that what we do traditionally at this moment in time. And I'm very happy to learn that in the festival, so many of the side events go about, this new approach to teaching, or the new tools to give teaching in a different way. I was listening to one about gaming, which really shows that you can use game in order to build character, in order to build judgments and things like this. The next slide shows that indeed the digital tools are available to help us in this transition. Of course, the transition has to focus on the teachers and the parents, who have to be aware and have to have the skills to help this, make this transition come true. But at least the tools are available. There is a lot of digital knowledge and content available. I was quite amazed when one of our members of COVIDEA was doing a report on digital tools for citizenship. And it was quite impressive how, in fact, already a lot of knowledge is available and being compiled. Then there are quite a number of new delivering tools, from augmented reality to gaming. Like I was mentioning, gaming could be a very good tool to learn. And increasingly, there is a lot of use of digital learning support, where we use artificial intelligence to really gear the teaching towards the individual capacities and needs of the individual students. So that in fact, you don't have a teacher giving a class to 30 students, but every single learning package is adapted to the needs and the skills of the individual learner. Also in the field of assessment and verification, there is a lot of new tools available. Particularly, I want to draw your attention on microcredits. So where indeed you could learn the skills you need and the knowledge you need for the particular job or the particular company you are going to join. And even in the field of education, management, for the registration, for the management of the class, online or offline, as nowadays is the case, there are a lot of tools available. So all these tools are available, and what the COVIDEA are trying to do is to make curated content so that you don't really have to go and search the web. And currently there is a tremendous amount of digital information available, but COVIDEA will help you find your way in this available information and give you guidance on how to use this information for supporting the SDGs, because everything is in function of particularly SDG 4, giving education, sound education to all, digital learning and lifelong learning. The next slide. So all these, these principles of COVIDEA are explained in our primer, and we invite you to read our primer and better to use the primer. Georgios will later explain what we're trying to do with the Digital Education Agora as a one-stop shop, you know, to get all this curated information at your fingertips. And we have two other components by which we try to operationalize COVIDEA or the primer. The first one is working with the private sector, because I think we all know that nowadays many of our learning content, many of the educational content is not anymore developed by the public sector and by the academy, but it's also a lot is developed by the private sector. And then the question is, how are we sure that this content, these platforms, these services developed by the private sector is also in function of implementing SDGs, and then in particular SDG 4. And therefore the organization that gathers all the digital companies together in a sustainability NGO, GESI, has started a program which they call Digital with a Purpose. Digital with a Purpose is in fact to set new standards for the ICT sector in order to help them to comply with the SDGs and to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs. You could really say it's a race to the top. It's trying to develop new metrics by which then the ICT sector can really contribute to the further development in a positive way. And GESI is helping them by developing, together with COVIDEA, this matrix, this standard for the educational sector. So this is one important component of how we try to operationalize our COVIDEA primer. The second component, next slide please, is then working with national governments within the framework of the Interagency Task Force on Technology Transfer. This is a task force of the United Nations organizations that are set together in support of Agenda 2030 and the implementation of the SDGs. And this task force is helping countries to develop roadmaps, realistic, doable roadmaps on how to achieve the SDGs. And again, the COVIDEA is working with these 42 UN organizations in order to help them, helping countries developing digital education roadmaps. Because many countries, of course, have traditional roadmaps, plans on how to develop the education sector. Very often, the digital tools along the lines we explained before are not yet considered in a sufficient amount. And so we are helping countries to introduce digital education tools into their road mapping, and indeed not only focus on acquiring knowledge, but also focusing on acquiring, on building character, building resilience, building responsible citizenship. So these are the two components, and I leave it then to Georgios to introduce the third component, but I do invite you all to read our primer and indeed to put our primer into practice so that we can join the other people in this festival to move to an educational system that is useful and that is preparing our students for a fulfilling life in the future. Thank you very much, Eszter, for this opportunity.
And I'm muted. Thank you very much, Veerle. I'm going to hand over directly to Georgios.
Hello, good morning from me too. And happy International Day of Education, like 2 days later. It's good to be with you. Thanks, Eszter, for the invitation. And with Veerle and the team of COVIDEA, we've tried to really go beyond the boundaries of what we consider now to be standard education and to really rethink it. And we think it's important to do it for the sake of the students and of lifelong learners, and for the sake of our societies in the future. So one futuristic element of COVIDEA is this digital education agora, how to learn and network in cyberspace. So I'll present it to you a bit in more detail, starting from the name. What's in the name itself? Next slide, please. The agora, coming from Greece myself, of course, I always relate the agora to the center of the ancient Greek cities, the forum where all social, artistic, spiritual, and political life took place. And that was the place to assemble, to discuss, right, to learn, to be civically engaged and active, to agree and disagree, but overall to learn how to be a person, a citizen, to participate and shape the common life of the city. So this COVIDEA project harnesses the agora concept of the past as the centerpiece of a new approach to education in the digital era. So we take the agora from the columns that you have seen of ancient ruins in Greece and in Rome and other ancient empires to the modern cyberspace, cyber world we live in. Next slide, please. So what is the concept really about? It has some key elements. It tries to bring together the elements of modern education. So it is a virtual platform with innovative tools, innovative content and methods to pedagogical methods, how to conduct education in the modern era, to respond to the learning requirements of today, right? In a rapidly evolving world, which is digital, which faces a lot of crises, multidimensional crises like we have now with the pandemic, the climate crisis, and interconnected crisis. We saw how we got an economic crisis out of a pandemic, and also climate crisis has a lot of dimensions. So we try to bring on this agora together those tools and technical and pedagogical and methodologies. We also try to bring together to all relevant stakeholders, because it's not only about students and teachers, which are the very core of education, but it is also about parents and of course about ministries of education, and it is about companies that produce the tools and the broader, let's say, universe of actors that are engaged in education, strictly speaking and broadly speaking. So we try to have this agora as the place where all these actors come together, and we want it to be a place to learn knowledge, but also values, understand more than just the importance of accumulating knowledge, but also to the importance of shaping a citizenship consciousness. Because this is the basis of our values and of our systems of societies. When we forget that, we just make people perhaps knowledgeable in quantity, but we miss the quality of engaged citizens that we want to have and to nurture. So, and that is from the local community to the global level, this is really important, the sense of identification with the community and citizenship. And then we want also to use the agora to showcase good practices and the latest technologies, often also in a light-hearted, pleasant way through gaming, etc., as we will see later. Next slide, please. So what is it in practice, or what will it be in practice? Because it is something we're developing. I'll tell you more about this afterwards, but we want it to be something like the International Space Station. For those who are familiar with it and like science fiction like me, perhaps, and science practice, you can see that it is a modular approach. You can bring elements from various countries, etc., put them together, create an international space station that has a lot of functions, and each of its elements play a different function, but also it works as a whole. And this is a modular approach. In this case, we have the following elements foreseen for the agora: a cafe, a library, digitarium, but let's visit the agora itself and see them there. The next slide, please. here is the Agora. Okay, I don't know if it gives you the sense of a space, of a place or a city in cyberspace, but as we said, when it's developed, it will be like that. So you enter from the gateway on the left, and you assume a role, because I mean, you go there as a student, as a teacher, right? As a parent, as an international organization like UNESCO, as a company, like, I don't know, whoever makes various tools, or a lifelong learner, any citizen who continues to learn. And you can go to the cafe where you find your peers, people of the same group, but you can also find others, also connect with others, ask questions, and exchange good practices about things. How do I learn this in the best possible way? Or how do I teach this in the best possible way? And things like that. If you have questions, you or the others who want to help you, you go to the library next door where there is curated material, how to build what Veerle said before about the goals of COVIDEA, to build character, to build resilience, to build citizenship. You can find ready material for each one of those with good practices, or you can do an artificial intelligence research to see whatever else is available around cyberspace. So if you can also go to the Digitarium, which is like a planetarium, where videos show you what is the latest technologies and how they can be used to support education and learning in general. So you can see, for example, there that through augmented reality, you can live history and you can really absorb it much better than just reading a book about a historical period. So these things have been worked on by our colleague on the COVIDEA team, Risto Linturi from Finland. The whole concept of the Agora and its realization digitally is been worked on by Antonio Camara, the professor in Portugal, and his team, and many other colleagues are contributing to this, to this effort. You can also have there go and play a game in the gaming alley and learn indirectly through the gaming process, and join also other partners. Go to the company showrooms, see what's the latest in terms of technology that's available, or go to the offices of the stakeholders. If you belong to the Parents International, I suppose there should be an office there, and we'll gladly host you, Eszter. Anyway, you're part of this effort. And others, UNESCO and others should be there. So that's about it, the concept and how we want to realize it. We'll go to the next slide very quickly. So yeah, the technical considerations are many. How do you enter the Agora? How do you access these meeting rooms? Whether you go with an avatar, you can have yourself moving around. We're trying to, when we have it ready, it should be a 3D environment. And all these search is integrated in a way that you feel that you live in that space and you can interact naturally with the others. There is a lot of potential, and we hope that we'll have a possibility to fully realize it and to open it to those who are interested in the broader public. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgios. When you are watching or rewinding the recording, you will see the contact details for all of us. So if anybody is interested, you can always reach out to any of the speakers of today. To finish the presentations and also to spark discussions, I'm going to talk about the parents' initiatives that are around enterprising in education. And I think that it is a very important approach because at the moment, parents are much better suited than professional educators to realize all those learning goals that have been listed in the COVIDEA initiative. Some of them are actually part and parcel of any entrepreneurial framework, like building resilience or critical thinking. So in a way, we are providing a framework and also some reasoning behind why this should be the approach to education. And also this is how the educators, parents being the most important of them, of course, for us, but definitely the first ones should approach the renewal of education. For this, in the ParENtrepreneurs Consortium, we translated the Entrecomp flower or Entrecomp cogwheel into a ParENtrepreneurial educational framework. There is another work being done by Bantani Education on explicit entrepreneurial competencies and skills for teachers, which are very, very important. Recent research that I was part of shows that the teaching professions are well behind in entrepreneurial approaches, but also in more or less all digital skills as compared to the general population. For example, Veerle and Georgios were mentioning critical thinking, the ability to differentiate between fact and opinion is much lower among teachers than among the general population. Having said that, also the general population is parents, and many of them are actually very high on these skills. Of course, you will not rely on those who have a lot of need for competence development, but you're going to rely on those parents who are high-ranking officers in digital companies, who are critical thinkers themselves, who are entrepreneurs. It's also important because we have also found in our research that those people who decide to go for professional education as their path are generally much less entrepreneurial and very risk averse as compared to general public, or in that sense, parents. So it is just a very well-suited collaboration. And what we have suggested is that in education, when you are looking at the spotting opportunities and ideas phase of the entrepreneurial competence framework, you have to focus and develop competences in spotting opportunities, creative approaches, valuing ideas, especially ones that are not totally your own, and having ethical and sustainable thinking around it. Also, we all know that resources, both physical and virtual and human resources, are very, very important to realize the necessary change in education. So what we are focusing on is self-awareness and self-efficacy. Resilience is very much part of this element of resources, motivation and perseverance, and working with and mobilizing others. We have found that in the school closure periods and all the really devastating measures as pandemic response have actually sparked parental activism. What we want to see is that this parental activism is also utilized in maintaining schools, because there is a very frightening development that parents don't believe in states providing education anymore, and they're rather setting up their own systems, which is just the wrong approach. And once we have the ideas and all the resources, then we have to jump into action. But jumping into action means that you have to have very thorough planning. You have to be able to analyze and cope with risk. And we have seen in the last 2 years that you also have to really cope with ambiguity and uncertainties. And this is a learning journey. So this is part of lifelong learning. You are also learning from your experiences, and you are looping it back to previous phases so that you can find new opportunities and also dig up some new resources. So this is the framework that we are providing for enterprising in education. And the question that I want to focus on a little bit is what we mean by fit for future results. This has been a parents' initiative. So I wanted to clarify what kind of roles parents can have in education. Parents are the primary educators of their children, which means two things. They are the first educators, but also we clearly see from research that they have the biggest impact on learning success, not the actual academic outcomes, but children's approach to learning. They have the primary role up to about age 11, 12. Then it's taken over by the peer group, but parents are still the second, and it's never the teachers as compared to common belief. Also, parents are scaffolders of education, so they are providing the frameworks which will make it possible for the child to develop and for also the professional educators to do their jobs. And parents can also be gatekeepers, gatekeepers in two different senses. On the left-hand side, you see this quote from the Game of Thrones, "You shall not pass." So they can just keep the gates closed when it comes to anything to renew education. But also what you can see on the right-hand side, they can be the gatekeepers who are keeping the gates open. And of course, this is what we are pursuing, because parents are the ones who have a lot of experience in using new technologies. They also know what they as employers need or don't need from what the education system is providing for. So we are working towards the left-hand side meaning of gatekeeper. For this, there is a very, very big need for having a parental engagement approach in schools. And for this, I just brought you a short quote that very much summarizes what we mean by parental engagement, because very often parental involvement and parental engagement are used as synonyms while they aren't. The big difference is that when you speak about involvement, then you are inviting the parents to take part in something that already exists. And parental engagement means that you as professionals in the school reflect on parental needs and also fears, but also you engage the parents from the first moment in figuring out what to do differently. And we believe that this is the approach, a partnership approach, that we badly need for the necessary changes. Whatever has been outlined as the technical approach to reimagining education also needs a reimagining of the soft part. And this is where we can enterprise in education and also feed into what the COVIDEA initiative has started to demand for. We also know that there is a huge wish on the side of parents to be heard of, and to be heard, and to be part of the renewal. There has been two really large-scale researches published recently that very clearly see that parents have a different view on education. They value social emotional learning and active citizenship learning much more than academic learning. Probably it was a change during the school closures, but definitely it was a change that was triggered by parents experiencing much more that academic content in curricula is becoming more and more obsolete, and that other types of learning are much more important. Parents International started research-based global action call back in May 2020, which probably seems very early in the pandemic restriction period, but not much has changed since. So the two large-scale researches that were conducted in 2021 basically reinforced our messages. And this slide very briefly summarizes what parents have been asking for. The first and also already mentioned element, that school is a place for social learning, much less academic learning. It can be acquired at home on your own, reading, looking into resources, but we do need the physical meeting place. Of course, the digital agora is a nice extension, but we need children to meet in person and to be together. We also have to have a clear division. We have to have a clear understanding what is the role of school in the educational continuum of the child. Just yesterday, I was a speaker at a webinar with the European SchoolNet, where we had a very interesting discussion on basic skills. Because everybody says that, yeah, it's very, very important to have all this, but first children have to acquire basic skills. But what we have found is that there is no agreement on what we mean by basic. And Parents International have a separate initiative on trying to define basic skills in various fields, together with economic actors, researchers, and also some policymakers. What has also become very apparent is that it's very nice that we've been focusing a lot on academic knowledge and especially STEM education, but well-being is probably much more important, because if you have a high level of well-being, then your academic learning is also much better. With low levels of well-being, academic learning will actually not happen. So there is a need to focus on arts, sports, and child-centered, child-friendly methodologies. An interesting side effect is that we have found that it actually works to start later, that more or less all researchers are begging for, to not start school before 9 o'clock. And also to try to have a little bit longer school holidays, not just rushing through the holidays in the winter. So probably school schedules with regards to calendar and also the organization of the day will probably change. One other outcome was that some of the assessment methodologies that have been cast in stone became movable. So it would be the perfect moment to abolish standardized tests and to have much more formative assessment. And of course, as a penultimate finding is that there is a need to keep using digital tools, especially because digital tools are the best for individual inclusion needs and addressing them. Of course, parents want the teachers, want the professionals to understand, acknowledge family circumstances. This is very much a current school closure issue, but what we have seen that most of the chaos was caused by teachers not understanding that not in every home there are work from home parents who are actually not working from home, but doing the work of teachers. And also there is not necessarily a separate device and also enough broadband for everybody to do online learning. So this is the basis of our initiative. And what we want to do is basically eliminate the possibility that parents will be the obstacle to change, but we would like to support parents to be more entrepreneurial, to also scaffold the learning of teachers to be more enterprising in their approaches to education. And parents are there to keep the gate open for any new initiatives for the best interest of our children. Would like to thank you all for your attention. Unfortunately, this is a recorded session, so at the moment there is no possibility for questions and answers. But as I said, all our details are in the slides. If you rewind the recording, you can reach out to any of us. And we're always open to organizing in person. And well, I personally not really support online meeting possibilities, but let's try to continue this thinking and work and achieve a general, work for and achieve a general change of education. Thank you very much. And I'm just asking Veerle and Georgios whether you want to say anything as the closing remarks.
Just to say, yeah, it's important to be entrepreneurial, as you said, in the broader sense, which is not only about being entrepreneurs to make money, which is also important, but to keep the society moving, exploring, and keeping the young people interested, and as you said, making them happy, making education part of the life and part of exploring the world and being the happiest persons and successful in their careers. So I think we're together in this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you, Eszter, for being so much at the forefront of this needed change. Working with parents and changing what people think about parents and the attitude of parents at the same time, I think is extremely needed. And of course, like you rightly say, it was very often in the educational circles, you hear that they say, oh, it's the parents, who don't want change. And they are so much on having good results, and everything is focusing on, if the kid comes home with a 7 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. And what you are indicating and showing is that indeed there is a change happening, and that parents, maybe at the forefront of asking for change to prepare the children for a quickly changing world. So I would like to stop by saying thank you, and I hope you can continue your good work and reaching out to many, many parents. And then this change is going to happen if there is a demand for change. Because my reading is that indeed the demand for change is not so much going to come from the established institution. That takes a long time. But if parents are going to start demanding change and demanding that we equip our kids with computational skills, social and emotional intelligence, we will see quickly a change in the education system and a much happier society in 5-10 years from now. So thanks for your work and good luck with your workshop this afternoon. And indeed, we hope that soon we will be all together for an in-person meeting to bring this quest of ours forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I can also only thank you for your enthusiasm and the investment, especially human resources investment in the COVIDEA initiative. And we definitely will continue pursuing the goals together, which are very much in line. So what you would want to achieve is very much in line with what we would like to achieve based on especially parents' needs. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Okay, thanks.